World reacts as U.S. top court limits Trump's tariff powers. Some countries welcome the ruling, while others review trade deals and economic effect. President Donald Trump has imposed a new 10% worldwide tariff after the United States Supreme Court struck down his previous trade measures, triggering immediate concern and responses from governments and markets. On Friday, Trump announced the decision on his social media platform, Truth Social, saying he has signed an executive order to impose the global tariff, which will take effect almost immediately. The U.S. top court's ruling and Trump's new tariffs have left countries grappling with the legal and economic fallout, raising questions about ongoing agreements, tariff reductions, and the legality of past duties. Governments are now evaluating how the new levy will affect key industries, investment plans, and trade negotiations, while analysts warn that uncertainty could persist until legal and trade frameworks are clarified. In South Korea, one of the U.S.'s closest allies, the presidential office, Blue House, has released a statement, saying the government will review the trade deal and make decisions in the national interest, casting a question mark over the agreement signed in November last year, which lowered tariffs from 25% to 15% in exchange for $350 billion in cash and investments from South Korea in the U.S. For major South Korean companies in chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and semiconductors, the Supreme Court ruling has been positive. Even if Trump introduces the new 10% tariffs under Section 122, they would still pay a lower rate, said Jack Barton, an Al Jazeera correspondent in Seoul. However, exporters of automobiles, more than half of which go to the U.S., remain subject to the 25% tariff, and steel exports are still hit with 50% duties under Section 232, which was not affected by the ruling. The South Korean government is expected to move cautiously. Exports account for 85% of South Korea's gross domestic product, with the U.S. as the second largest market. Officials have indicated that rapid changes could jeopardize major agreements, including a recent multi-billion-dollar shipbuilding deal with the U.S. and other investments, said Barton. While no definitive policy statement has been made yet, the Blue House has said that the trade deal will be under careful review and changes are likely. India has faced some of the highest U.S. tariffs under Trump's previous use of emergency trade powers. The president first imposed a 25% levy on Indian imports and later added another 25% on the country's purchases of Russian oil, bringing the total to 50%. Earlier this month, the U.S. and India reached a framework trade deal. Trump said Prime Minister Narendra Modi agreed to stop buying Russian oil and that U.S. tariffs would be lowered to 18% for India's top exports to the U.S., including clothing, pharmaceuticals, precious stones, and textiles. Meanwhile, India said it will eliminate or reduce tariffs on all U.S. industrial goods and a range of agricultural products. According to political economist M.K. Venu, founding editor of Indian publication, The Wire, critics have argued New Delhi should have waited for the U.S. Supreme Court decision before finalizing the interim trade deal, and even trade analysts previously connected with the government have maintained it would have been wiser to wait for the court verdict. Venu added that Trump was eager to finalize the trade deal, which includes a commitment to buy $500 billion worth of new imports in defense, energy, and artificial intelligence (AI) from the U.S. over the next 5 years. While India, he said, welcomed the reduction of tariffs to 18% and the removal of penal duties on Russian imports, uncertainty remains over negotiations, as the Supreme Court ruling affects the legal basis of past tariffs. The Indian trade delegation is likely to wait for the final outcome of the Supreme Court verdict before proceeding with further negotiations, and countries around the world are expected to follow the court's ruling rather than rush into trade agreements under legislation deemed unconstitutional, he said. China has reacted in a muted way to the Supreme Court ruling, with much of the country still on the Lunar New Year break. Al Jazeera's Rob McBride, reporting from Beijing, said, the Chinese embassy in Washington has issued a blanket statement, noting that trade wars benefit nobody, and that the decision is likely to be broadly welcomed in China, which has long been a primary target of Trump's tariff policies. Since last April, he said, China has faced multiple layers of tariffs, including 10% on chemicals used in fentanyl production exported to the U.S. and 100% on electric vehicles. Analysts have estimated that the overall tariff level, about 36%, could now fall to about 21%, providing some relief to an economy already under strain from the COVID-19 pandemic, a prolonged property market crisis, and declining exports. Shipments from China to the U.S. have reportedly fallen by roughly a fifth over the past year. Beijing has sought to offset losses in the U.S. market by strengthening trade ties with Southeast Asian nations and pursuing agreements with the European Union, McBride said. The Supreme Court ruling may also create a more favorable atmosphere ahead of a planned state visit by Trump in early April, when he is expected to meet President Xi Jinping, Pot.